champ crowned, dip events abound, and Nexus Alliance found. I'm David Hood of the Diplomacy Broadcast Network, and this is Deadline, DBN's monthly news program. Dateline, August 2023. For our feature story, the first time this news program several months ago included our diplomacy debate segment, which we called Two-Way Draw, the response was overwhelmingly positive. So we at Deadline are all about giving the public what it wants, nay, what it needs, and thus are happy to announce the return of the aforementioned segment to the show for this episode. Jordan Connors, or Conk, as he's known online, is all set to disagree with me regarding a number of diplomacy-related topics later in this episode, in what we are calling Two-Way Draw Part 2. But first, a look at headlines from around the world of diplomacy. The 2023 World Diplomacy Championship just concluded in Bangkok, Thailand, and Australia's Jamal Blackharley has emerged as the champ, just barely edging out Chicago's Brandon Fogel by operation of a tiebreaker. Both players finished the top board at 14 centers, but Jamal's Austria had just enough juice to cross the finish line first. Full coverage of this year's WDC is available right here on DBN. If you missed this event, but you have a hankering to complete some face-to-face world stage competition, your next opportunity will be the 2024 World DipCon to be held near Milan, Italy, from May 31st through June the 2nd. There will be 3 preliminary rounds with qualifiers advancing to the top board on that Sunday, June 2nd. For more information, see the link provided below. You can't wait until next year to scratch your European tournament itch? Well, you don't have to. The Swiss Diplomacy Championship is coming right up in just a few days on September 2nd and 3rd in the southwestern Swiss town of Sion. There are 3 rounds of dip in that tournament over the 2 days. For more information, also see the link provided below. And then SpireCon, the 2024 edition of the UK tournament, has just announced its dates. It's coming up October 15 and 16. More information on SpireCon will be in the next episode of Deadline. As of the time of this broadcast, the 4th season of qualification for the DBN Invitational Tournament is well underway. This season's first edition of DBN's Countdown Show was just released several weeks ago, giving us the current standings in that race for tickets to diplomacy's big dance. Remember, the DBNI is a virtual face-to-face tournament played in February, pitting the 28 top players from that previous season's diplomacy competitions in all 3 primary formats of play. That would be extended deadline, face-to-face, and virtual face-to-face. Winners of tournaments big enough for automatic bids get their DBNI spots that way, with the remainder of the field of 28 receiving at-large bids based upon their performances throughout the season. Current auto qualifiers include Michalis Komarites, Ed Sullivan, and Matthew Krill, with the remainder of the current top 7 on that list being Nicolas Taillet, Riaz Varani, Ben Kelman, and David Miller. If you haven't seen that edition of Countdown yet, it's linked below. Also, remember that you need to have played at least some virtual face-to-face games during the season in order to qualify for the DBNI. And here's an excellent way for you to do that. Play in this year's VWDC Summer Classic on that VWDC Discord server. It's coming up August 25th through 27th. Even if you cannot play enough to compete in the tournament as a whole, by the time you see this episode, you can likely get into at least one game, even though the event will probably already be underway. So check it out and have fun. From the world of online leagues and tournaments, we have the news that the Nexus and Nexus Leagues Discord servers are back in cooperation with each other in terms of promoting diplomacy competition among players on multiple online platforms. The idea of a nexus between players on web diplomacy, play diplomacy, backstabber, conspiracy, and others has proven quite popular, with multiple leagues and tournaments running over the past several years involving players from all of those platforms. The Nexus Season 9 Extended Deadline Tournament, sometimes known as the Nexus Main Event, will be launching soon under the leadership of friend of the show, Keith Worstel, who is also known online as Superstition. Nexus Leagues almost always has waves of games starting for both its classic and variant matches. Links to both the Nexus and Nexus Leagues Discord servers can be found below in the show notes. Here at Deadline, we like to report to you when diplomacy makes a splash in non-diplomacy media outlets. In this month's edition of Game Trade Magazine, there is a nice piece about the new Renegade edition of the game called Diplomacy Enters a Renaissance. In addition to describing features of the new edition, such as the quick start rules and the new wooden pieces, the article describes the lasting appeal of diplomacy as a game, based upon its simplicity to learn but lifetime to master, as well as the potential to form long-term interpersonal relationships, given the very human element of diplomacy's gameplay. Also mentioned is the wide media attention garnered by Meta's AI diplomacy player Cicero winning a Blitz Press tournament against human opponents back several months ago. All in all, this is a great promo for the new Renegade set, so a link to subscription information for the magazine is listed below. Me, on the other hand, has already had a reaction to the new game release, which I feel, honestly, could only be adequately expressed through song. Wise men say only fools rush in, but I can't help falling in love with you. Shall I play? Would opening it be a sin? I don't care, I can't help falling in love with you. Like the Brit fleet's flow, surely to North Sea, Renegade and me, some things are meant to be. Take my cash, take my whole life too, for I can't help falling in love with you. Dig the cover art and the wooden parts, rules we have quick start. Renegade, you've captured my heart. Take my cash, take my whole life too, for I can't help falling in love with you. I can't help falling in love with you. And I can't neither. I talked earlier about the international diplomacy tournament scene, so let me report to you on goings-on in North American face-to-face play. The last week of July saw the World Board Gaming Championships take place as usual in Seven Springs, Pennsylvania. Also, as usual, Thomas Haver taught newcomers to play the game during a scheduled demo and then ran the WDC or WBC Dip tournament. This year's winner's circle was populated by WBC regulars, including the winner Robert Zahn, with Dan McNeil and Jeff Heyman following along in second and third. And then a week later, the tournament at Gen Con in Indianapolis, billed as the U.S. Diplomacy Championship, saw Dan McNeil do even better by taking the crown after a marathon top board played in Lucas Oil Stadium itself. There are also several North American Diplomacy Federation events coming up in the next couple of months. At the end of September, we have Weasel Moot in Chicago, with the Liberty Cup in Philadelphia happening exactly 1 week later. You will hear from Liberty's tournament director later in this broadcast. And then, at the end of October, the DIP tournament will again take place at the Carnage Games tournament in Vermont. So links to all three of those events can be found below. Now, let's take a trip around the world of YouTube channels and other diplomacy content creators to report to you on the latest and greatest new diplomacy products from whom we call our DBN media partners. British hobbyist Malarkey has launched a new diplomacy zine called 34, which is available monthly as a PDF. The inaugural issue is linked below, which also includes a subzine aimed at beginning players called Send Noobs. In this first edition of 34, there are articles on negotiation, hobby history, the online diplomacy leagues, and more. And now our Australian friends Amby and Kaner at the Diplomacy Games podcast have also just released their latest episode, focused mainly on the recent face-to-face game they played in Brisbane in preparation for both of them to attend the WDC in Bangkok. In addition to interviewing the board topper from that recently played local game, the guys also discussed several variant games, including one just added to the V Diplomacy site, which is based upon the conflict between Maori tribes of New Zealand. That sounds fun. Finally, Florida Man added a video to his YouTube channel in which he reads an article written by diplomacy creator Alan Calhammer entitled A Dozen Years of Diplomacy. It's an absolute blast, and was so to this hobby historian. Links to all of this content can be found in the show notes. On last month's show, I neglected to mention that the latest edition of the hobby's flagship publication, Diplomacy World, was released on July 1st. So let's fix that right now. Hey guys and gals, the latest edition of Diplomacy World was just released on July 1st. Issue 162 was particularly full of tournament reports and previews, including for events in San Marino, Chapel Hill, Denver, and Columbus. There's also Cameron Higby writing about the Chaos Italy variant, Paul Webb on the Civil War in America variant, Zachary Moore on hobby service opportunities, and much more. Check out editor Doug Kent's latest production using the link provided below. And start thinking now about what article you could write for submission. The deadline to submit your glorious diplomacy literature for DW is October the 1st. You know, I just mentioned the Denver event, the regatta, being covered in that latest Diplomacy World. That reminds me, it's been far too long since we've seen Ed Sullivan's back channel show here on DBN. So let's cut to him now interviewing the winner, Matt Krill, from the tournament floor of the Denver event, along with his interview of longtime diplomacy friend of mine, Ed Prim. The rest of his back channel report from Denver can be found on the DBN website.
Right this time. Welcome to Back Channel, the flagship show of DBN. Since DBN is not here, since there's no David Hood, I have now taken over. I've taken over.
Yeah, that's the way it is, I guess.
Well, it's not the way it is after round one, is it? Matt Krill, winner of whipping, having a great year. Come here, round one, boom. 13 center board top.
Yeah, I had a good board top with turkey and just basically the product of how the board went. But yeah, feeling pretty good after the first round.
All right. Now what's the plan for round 2 or 3? When is the real Matt Krill, the Matt Krill with the heart of iron, who will take out people and make them feel bad? along the way. When does that map come out?
Yeah, he's never come out. It's just not me.
That's only when you play me.
Well, yeah.
Other than me.
You bring that up.
Other than, look, how are you always the calm in the storm? Like, don't you get excited at all? I get excited all the time, but I look at you and it's all under control.
I get excited, but I guess I would run a pretty even keel and just try to not get too high or too low. And it works well for me. Stay calm.
Stay calm. What's the angriest you've ever gotten? Have you ever yelled at a person in your entire life?
Oh yeah, yeah.
No, there's no way.
No, my poor daughter's probably
No.
Yeah. That's life.
All right.
But no, I do get angry.
Why'd you come down here to Denver?
Yeah, so I was in town actually visiting family that lives here. I grew up out here. And so I've been out here for 2 weeks. And so I'm here at the end of that 2 weeks and just taking in this diplomacy tournament while I'm out here.
Okay. Look, we recorded one of the best back channels ever, but
yeah,
due to technical difficulties, it didn't air. And I'm not even blaming DBN on this one. But we hugged out our differences. We're going to hug it out now.
All right.
Come on. Go hug. Go hug. I love you.
Love you too.
Good luck to you.
All right. You too.
All right, welcome to Back Channel, the premier show on the Diplomacy Broadcast Network. And I have Ed Prem? That's right. All right. Well, welcome to the best show on the Diplomacy Broadcast Network. First question. You've never heard.
Thank you for having me on it.
You've never even heard of the Diplomacy Broadcast Network, have you?
No, I haven't. It's the first time.
Okay. Aren't you excited to go home and watch yourself later tonight and see how you did?
No, I prefer to stay and play more diplomacy.
Okay. Speaking of which, this man may have driven the furthest to get here. You drove here from Dallas, Texas. How many hours?
That's right. It's about 13 hours.
All right. And how'd you find out about this tournament? Why'd you decide to come to this one?
Oh, I think Manus pinged on me and said, "Hey, here's the Facebook group. Why don't you come?" So I said, "Absolutely."
All right. Now, notice I'm not asking whether, but how many men have you killed with your bare hands?
None.
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 Are you sure that you're just not allowed to answer that question? You're just going to go complete denial on it?
None.
Okay. I played with this man 2 times in a row. I tried everything I could. I even called him an alpha male at one point. You are a dominating presence on the diplomacy board. How did you get to that way? Is it always that way your entire life?
Oh no, it's just the intimidating mustache.
Look, I want to tell you, you live in Texas, but I really have the urge to snip. What's the story behind this? This is awesome.
I just got bored one day during COVID and decided to do it. Then I shaved it all off, and recently my wife asked me to do it again.
All right, look, give me your diplomacy style, because you saw all the angles on the board last night and today, but you're very loyal. You're not really a stabby guy. I didn't see you stab anybody in 2 days.
Well, I tried, but it went badly. So yeah, I'm more of a loyalist, care bear kind of player. Although Edie would disagree with you on that. Eddie personally would disagree. But yeah, I do tend to try to get more information and just try to be a good ally.
All right. You're gonna come back next year?
Of course.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
The Virtual Diplomacy League finished its latest set of virtual face-to-face games on August the 12th, with the best board top achieved in the first game of that day by California resident Jackson Roberts as a 15-center France after fending off an early EG assault. This catapulted Jackson into second place overall in the VDL standings, with Frenchman Nicolas Taillet keeping a hold of that top spot for now. The link to DBN's League Night coverage of those games is below. In other league news, round 5 of the Tour of Britain, which is the other English language league for the play of virtual face-to-face, is coming up on Saturday, September 9th at 4 p.m. UK time on the VWDC Discord server. Go to that server to sign up with TD Gary Sturley. The link is posted below if you're not already on that server. If you are on the server, make sure you choose the Tour of Britain role to find that space. It does not matter if you have played in previous rounds of the tour. Everyone is welcome to join on these games. And the next game day for the VDL is a few weeks later, on Saturday, September 23rd, also on that same VWDC Discord server. And now it's time for a segment we call My Favorite Things in which I interview a diplomacy hobbyist about their passion or interest, whether or not related to diplomacy. This month, we welcome to the show Portland, Oregon player and organizer Bill Hackenbracht to talk about his experiences with the game of diplomacy, about his hosting of the upcoming Liberty Cup tournament in Philadelphia, and also about his long service in the United States Army. Hey there, Bill, and welcome back to Deadline.
It's a pleasure to join you.
All right, now let's start with your introduction to diplomacy itself. How and when did you first get involved in the hobby?
I was a young 18-year-old at a youth leadership retreat, and the organizers of the event broke out the game, explained the rules, and we played 2 years. I was Austria. I stabbed Russia. I wanted to keep playing, and they boxed it up and said, we're moving on to the next thing, and I was hooked for life.
It's totally shocking to me that in your first game you stabbed somebody. That's totally ridiculously shocking to me, Bill Hackenbracht.
Out of character.
It totally is. So you have won tournaments. You've made the top board in other tournaments. What is your best piece of advice that you could give to folk who want to improve their performance in a tournament setting?
Bottom line, it's getting those reps in and getting those sustained reps in. There's a difference between playing an extended deadline game or a weekly or like a weekend meetup game versus playing 2 to 3 to 4 games in a short period of time. So getting those reps in, getting that experience, and building that muscle memory of, hey, this is how I survive 3 weeks of intense emotional negotiating.
That's fair. By the way, folks, we are going to talk about where he is and what the background is. We're going to do that a little bit later in this interview. Let me keep going here. I know from personal experience that you are good at lots of other board games besides diplomacy, because you and I have played a lot of board games. Is there something about this particular game that you find that makes it distinctive from all the other board games that one might enjoy?
The simultaneous adjudication, the fact that randomness is removed from the game, and that it truly is your wits and your ability to negotiate your own future, as opposed to relying on lucky dice rolls, that drew me to the game originally and keep me coming back.
Yeah, that's totally understandable. So that much having been said, what other games are you into right now?
So right now I'm into playing catch with my son and reading him books about board games. The great Ambi Valdez from she has that great children's book that came out on Kickstarter recently for board game night. But what I enjoy playing is 18XX, as well as a fantastic 3-person game called Triumph and Tragedy, which is a World War II, pre-World War II and then World War II simulation game.
Is that the game? Is that the one where you play in the UK, the US, or USSR, or is that a different game?
Yeah, you either play the Allies, the Soviets, or the Axis powers.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking about Churchill, but you're thinking about Triumph and Tragedy, which is another 3-player game. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Now, speaking of 18XX train games, which you and I are both fans of, I know you will be hosting tournaments for both those games and diplomacy in Philadelphia soon. So tell us a little bit about that.
That's correct. So I run the Liberty Board Game Convention in Philadelphia, held on October 6th, 7th, and 8th of this year, which is Columbus Day weekend for those of you who are making holiday plans. I just spoke with the DoubleTree this morning. They've confirmed that our room is available and reserved for us. So it will be at the Hilton DoubleTree in downtown Philadelphia, right on Broad Street, right in the heart of America's birthplace, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
That's true. All right, now give us the Liberty lowdown. Why should folks go to Philly?
Well, if you like board games, especially 18XX, or more importantly to this broadcast, diplomacy, it is a fantastic and friendly environment to play these games in not to say it's not competitive, but the emphasis of Liberty Cup is on social opportunities to really build friendships within the diplomacy hobby and within the larger board gaming hobby. So it's 3 rounds, no final table, but 3 rounds of games. And the Saturday evening is our traditional social night, where we go out to a place called Brauhaus Schmidt and have a fantastic family style dinner, followed by either bars or a cake or other dessert opportunities that are right there off of Broad Street near the hotel.
Well, I know the last time I went to Liberty, I chowed down on cheesesteak and I dug it. It was good.
So our opening ceremony is actually a group order from Woodrow's cheesesteaks off of South Street in just a few minutes from the hotel. And that's my favorite cheesesteak in Philadelphia. But that's the nice thing about Philadelphia is there's lots of restaurants to choose from. And there's activities for family that maybe aren't as into board games as maybe some of us are. Philadelphia is home to some absolutely stunning children's museums. The Franklin Institute is a favorite of mine, as well as art museums. There's the Philadelphia Art Museum, made famous in the Rocky movies with the run up the steps. But there's also other art galleries as well. And for those of you who are interested in clothes shopping, Pennsylvania has no sales tax on clothing purchases.
Well, I've never heard sales tax pitch for a diplomacy tournament, but I like it. There's nothing wrong with that. So how would folks contact you about Liberty Cup?
So you can go to www.liberty-cup.com or email me at bill.hack14@gmail.com. I will respond and get you more information. But hey, we've got a digital sign up on the Liberty Cup page for individuals to sign up either for more information or for the event itself. And I really encourage people to visit the page. There's a lot more information about the venue, about Philadelphia itself, and about the tournament structure and format.
All right. I appreciate all that. All right. Now let's pivot just a minute. This is the My Favorite Thing segment. We talk about what you do maybe outside of diplomacy. Where are you? Because you live in Portland, Oregon, but that doesn't look like no Portland. So where are you?
So right now I am physically standing on U.S. Naval Base Pearl Harbor, Hickam Air Force Base. So I'm on the Pearl Harbor side. Behind me is a static display. That's the conning tower from the USS Parsh, which was a World War II, a very highly decorated World War II submarine. And I'm in the Army. I'm stationed in Portland, Oregon, and the unit I'm a member of has an Indo-Pacific focus. So I'm out here for meetings and conferences and trying to compress as much into 1 week as possible.
Understood. Tell us what your rank is, and to the extent you can, tell us a little bit about what you do in your job in the military.
So I'm a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army. I'm in the Army Reserves, but for some of you might not know, 8% of the Army Reserves is full-time soldiers. So I'm a full-time Army Reserve officer. I'm the operations officer for a civil affairs brigade in Portland, Oregon, where I'm the chief planning and operations officer for about 800 weekend warriors or Army Reserve soldiers.
Would be the more appropriate term. How did you get in? I mean, why did you enter the service?
So it was my senior year of college was 2001 to 2002. And after 9/11, I walked into a recruiter's office and joined the United States Army. And I've been serving ever since. Took a few months to get through the onboarding process, but I've been serving as an Army officer since December 2001.
Well, as an American myself, I will say thank you for your service. I will also say that I would like to know some experience you've had in the Army that you think folk would find the most maybe surprising.
Well, I met my wife on deployment at U.S. Embassy Amman in Jordan. I've been to Afghanistan a couple times. and my first duty station was in Germany. And I played no diplomacy the 3 years that I was in Germany, even though our good friend Nicolas Sahuget won the world championship in Berlin that year. I apparently missed some great diplomacy while I was there. But that was, at the time, I think that was the largest face-to-face event we've ever had, was that Berlin World Championship.
Maybe because you weren't there, Bill. There may be a cause and effect relationship. I don't know.
Oh, I think you might have a point there, David.
Have you interacted with any other board gamers or diplomacy players in the Army?
Absolutely. We have a copy of the board game in our office at my brigade headquarters, and it hasn't been touched. But we're hoping to do an officer professional development of the game at some point. Sounds like a ship's about ready to.
I was going to say, we're getting some live action here in this recorded interview. Any other final thoughts for our audience about liberty, about diplomacy, about Hawaii?
Yes. So if you live in the northeast area of the United States, between New York and Washington, D.C., and between Pittsburgh and New Jersey, I highly encourage you to come to Liberty Cup. I will work to connect players with other players for hotel rooms or Airbnb. This is I try to frame Liberty Cup as a hobby strengthening event. It's an opportunity to meet other people and play some competitive diplomacy, but more importantly, meet other people, make those connections, and really build the strength of the hobby moving forward. It parallels some of the work I do with the World Diplomacy Database, which you can find a link to on both the NADF Discord server as well as the Virtual World Diplomacy community, the VWDC, which I had the pleasure of being a plank holder, helping start it. But man, the team that's running it now is really doing an amazing job. I think my only current contribution is changing the logo to reflect Pride Month and things like that. But hey, I'm so happy for the leadership that is being demonstrated, both by yourself, by Zach Moore, and by the teams doing extended deadline, gunboat, virtual face-to-face, and of course face-to-face. I've never seen the hobby stronger and more engaged, and I'm really looking forward to hosting another event in a series of fantastic events.
Well, Bill, I appreciate your willingness to do that. I appreciate all the work that you've done for the diplomacy hobby in the past. You were basically the one that did the face-to-face registry that we have. So appreciate all of your work in the past, and good luck to you in your attempt to enjoy yourself in Hawaii.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, David.
And now for our feature presentation. Back in February, we introduced a new segment here on Deadline, which we called Two-Way Draw. Seattle hobbyist Jordan Connors and I take a series of diplomacy-related subjects, debate them back and forth, and then let you, the audience, draw your own conclusions about who's right, who's wrong, him, and who's awesome, again, me. Our first installment was quite popular, so now let's dive right in to Two-Way Draw, Part 2. Jordan, welcome back to Deadline for this installment of the Two-Way Draw.
Thanks so much, David. It is such a pleasure to be back here, ready to make you look silly yet again.
Yeah, I mean, Two-Way Draw makes it sound like that we're going to tie. We're not going to tie. One of us is going to win this, and I think it'll be the same person that won it last time. Well, let's get into this. The first topic for our discussion of Two-Way Draw, strong alliance play is lazy. All right, Conk, you got an opinion on this one?
Strong alliance play is absolutely not lazy. Strong alliance play is anything but. It is so much like building a strong relationship, David, in the real world. And shout out, Mrs. Conk, I love you, baby doll. Strong alliance play takes communication. It takes constantly adapting to new circumstances, new elements on the board. It takes never taking your alliance partner for granted. And it takes hard work. It is an important part of the game, and it is anything but lazy. David, tell me you don't disagree with that one.
Well, I would say, first of all, and I feel like I need to say this very quickly, there is no chance that Mrs. Conk is watching this program on YouTube. There is no chance. But secondly, I think the real answer to this question is strong alliance play can be lazy. If you end up in a relationship like you're talking about, which I agree that's an important part of the game, but you are unwilling to consider the fact that sometimes your strong alliance needs to become a broken alliance, then that can be a little lazy. I mean, in other words, you can get a little complacent in your alliance relationship and miss opportunities that the game has given you to rearrange the board. So I think strong alliance play can be lazy.
To make this more succinct, David, you could just say, I agree with you, Conk. I mean, that's basically a short way of saying exactly what you just said. The only part I'm really going to take issue with is don't presume that Mrs. Conk is not part of the 15 to 20 viewers that click on the link of your show every week. I think probably half of them are my friends and family, and she is absolutely one of your biggest fans.
I am glad to hear that you are single-handedly responsible for our viewership. That will help you answer the next question, which is good fences make good neighbors. I'm going to take this one first and get an answer in the affirmative. Good fences make good neighbors. Because now, but what I mean by good fences, and we may end up with some definitional disputes, but what I mean by good fences is a border situation that can make good neighbors. Sometimes that involves units that you need to leave on the border of your ally or on the border of your good neighbor, bouncing or otherwise. Sometimes that involves arranging the center ownership to make sure that you've got a sort of a fence between centers that could be of danger for someone else to have other than you, and vice versa. An example of that would be, and I think in a strong AT alliance, it can make a lot of sense for Austria to own Bulgaria and Turkey to own Greece, because it is easier to set up some defensive lines that don't involve stab opportunities as much. Now, are you telling me that this quote, which comes from a well-known American poet, could possibly be incorrect in any way?
It couldn't be less correct, David.
All right.
Good fences do not make good neighbors. The entire goal of any negotiation in diplomacy is to get the bad guy units, get all the units moving away from you. If you can't do that with your ally neighbor, then you're in for a long, slow grind, and you're probably not going to win. The advantage of having a neighbor ally is that you're going to dedicate fewer units to patrol that border, fewer units to check each other, and you're both going to grow elsewhere by sending those units someplace else. So the idea that mounting units on your border is going to be good for anyone except for the 5 other players in the game is absolutely wrong. I don't care what poet or what diplomacy talk show host says otherwise.
Well, I don't care about other diplomacy talk show hosts. I agree with you there. But I do think that wisdom, timeless wisdom of the ages, like this phrase, has certain application to diplomacy. And I think that anybody who thinks otherwise is some kind of anarchist that wants to upend the American way of life. And I'm surprised that you, Conk, as suspicious as I am sometimes of you, would go that low.
And I will make the same suggestion I think I made to you the last time we got together to talk. And that is wipe away the cobwebs and the dusty old tomes that you're relying on. Look at the board, think about real life and reality, and let's update our preconceived notions, because relying on some line from some old poet is not the best path to victory.
These young whippersnappers with their newfangled ideas. Anyway, let's go to the next one. Variants are all unbalanced wastes of time. I'm going to take this one first and say, no, of course this is not true. It is certainly true that there are variants that are unbalanced. We know that. And sometimes, there are variants that are more balanced and more playable than others. But the point of variance is to allow for variety. And it gives people that are history buffs or geography buffs some extra fun in diplomacy, which is, putting the rules that they really enjoy, the gameplay they really enjoy, the negotiation aspect, and put it in a different historical context or a geographic context. That's fun for people. Are you anti-fun, Con? Because that's your problem. You're against fun.
I would like to let the record state, David, I'm not against fun. But she who seeks out new variants, new powers, new rules, new maps, lacks imagination and creativity on the board that has been given to us. My variants come from the varied personalities that sit around the board with me and the varied situations that we encounter. There are infinite variants one can find and enjoy on the single board that was handed down to us decades ago. I think that if you're in search of variance, you're looking in the wrong place. I think you need to find more interesting playfellows, and you're going to find that all the variety you need is right there on the board that was first published and brought to us when David was, I don't know, 50, 60 years old. Is that about right?
I refuse to answer questions that impermissibly infringe on my right to privacy. But hearing that answer makes me think it's not variants that are unbalanced. There's some other things out there that might be a little unbalanced. Speaking of which, let's talk about a completely unbalanced situation. It's perfectly fine for someone to solo the Online Diplomacy Championship top board. Do you agree with that, Conk? It's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I think it's perfectly fine. I think there's conventional wisdom that the greatest players are tactical geniuses who would never let a solo happen. And so in the highest level game with the highest level players, there's some flaw if it turns out that someone gets to 18. That wisdom is absolutely wrong. There are so many reasons a solo might happen that have nothing to do with somebody's tactical mistake. It might be very intentional for someone who didn't solo. And there are so many flavors of great players that has nothing to do with their particular tactical brilliance or how prone they are to a mistake to hold up a stalemate line. So I think that wisdom is false. I think there are a lot of great reasons why there might be a solo in the highest of competitions. And certainly one of them could be one just incredibly outstanding player.
Okay, let me be a little more pointed. Was it perfectly fine for this to happen? You were on the top board. You didn't solo the top board by definition, but you were on the top board. And are you suggesting that this was just Red Candle being awesome and that there were no mistakes made by high-level players to let somebody solo a top board of a major championship?
David, let me be clear. Mistakes were absolutely made. I was absolutely on that board, and I was absolutely delighted to see Red Candle solo. I could get into the details, David. It involved a neighboring player of mine who was so enamored with my statistics and record, as you know, the greatest diplomacy player of all time, that he essentially drove a truck off a cliff and landed on my house. That is how sincerely he wanted to go down in flames at my expense. And as a result, I was more than happy to see someone else achieve a solo, and I certainly helped him do it. And I think that was a perfectly fine result given the circumstances.
So you failed to convince this guy of something, and then you threw the game, is what I'm hearing. Am I hearing that correctly?
No, I think there's something wrong with your hearing, and I think, David, you should get it checked out. That's not at all what I said. But it's perfectly a fine result, and sometimes even the person who's not achieving that result might guide it along a little bit for all sorts of reasons.
Well, and I should say congratulations to Red Candle. No offense intended to your outstanding result. All right, let's go.
That, no doubt.
Yeah, I know. I thought you would because you're the one that threw the game to him. Anyway, let's move to the stalemate line is a design flaw. Jordan, how about answering this question if you would?
Sure. So, David, the map isn't perfect. It's certainly not balanced. And if we were starting from scratch right now to create a board, we might do things differently. But that's done. It's we've been playing on it, some of us, for centuries, me for at least years. And the stalemate line has become a central part of it. It has become a central part of so many discussions anybody might have on the map. And it is something to sort of read and react to. And it makes an enormous difference in the game. So I wouldn't call it a design flaw. I would call it part of the design, just like any other part of it. It's something that we have to react to and account for. And it certainly pays to know exactly where it is and how to get there. But it's the board we have, David, and we all just need to operate the best we can within it.
Actually, I completely agree with you on this one, I have to say. I think the stalemate line is not just
okay.
It's not, no, it's okay. It happens occasionally. The planets will align once every 7 years or so. The stalemate line is not just not a design flaw, it's a design feature of the game as far as I'm concerned, because it is an important objective of the game is to know where the stalemate line is and know strategically how you're going to either defeat the stalemate line or prevent someone else from defeating it or foiling it or breaching it, whatever word you want to use. There are variant designers who are very open about the fact that they can't stand stalemate lines, and they intentionally try to design variants without them because they think that creates a superior game. I actually disagree. So I agree with you completely on this one, Jordan.
Beautiful. We could stop there.
We could, but we're not going to.
What do you got for me?
No, let's move on to another one that we may actually end up agreeing on this one. Spring 1901 should always see a Black Sea bounce. I will say to begin with, there are plenty of people who argue this and have argued this in print and on YouTube, that if either Turkey or Russia doesn't go to the Black Sea, they're making a big mistake, because if the other one goes there, then they're completely screwed over. So, Jordan, why don't you answer this question first? But I set it up by saying there are plenty of people who make this argument all the time.
Sure. I'd like to start, David, by saying what a terrible, boring question that is. Who comes up with these questions? I don't want to put you on the spot. It's a terrible question. Saying that anything should always happen is ridiculous. The point, like I said earlier, the goal you should go into every negotiation is how do I make the other units go away from me? Sometimes you want to bounce in Black Sea, but you always want to remain flexible and you want to have something to give and take in a negotiation. So my answer, David, is terrible question. Of course not. Be flexible and look for whatever way you can to make friends and not enemies.
Again, I actually could not agree with you more. And the reason that the question reads this way is because I do see this argued a lot. And I, from people who are good players, will argue this a lot. And I could not disagree with that more, because I'm totally in your camp on this as well. That there is no such thing as the word always in diplomacy strategy. Unless the question is, should Khan always go to Bulgaria? Probably. That's the only one I can think of, though, honestly. Almost everything else, it is hard for me to imagine that there would only be one answer to these strategic questions. So I totally agree with you. Flexibility is important. Black Sea bounces are fine, but it's totally okay, for example, to do if you're Turkey and you want to, and you're a little worried about the Russians, but you want to get your fleet out, then go to Armenia. Tell them you're going there. Say, why don't you bounce me there with your fleet? And that's a way to do it. That gives you some good fences to make good neighbors, but allows you to get your fleet out. So I completely agree with you. I mainly wanted to pose this question because we hear it a lot from people on in diplomacy media.
This is a touching moment.
It's about to come crashing to a halt. Western triples are an abomination. You're against this statement, aren't you?
Absolutely. I think statements with absolutes in diplomacy are an abomination, David. Look, Western triples are never my first choice, but they have their time and place, absolutely. So, for example, if something happens on the East where somebody's consolidating power fast, where a alliance is ripping towards the stalemate line, you have to be flexible enough to, even if you're fighting with your Western neighbors, to reassemble and meet that threat. But other than that, I've had games where I feel like I'm just the odd one out in the West, and I'm negotiating like crazy, and I'm trying to find some way to get France with me against Germany, or get Germany with me against England, or some combination. And I just feel like it's not happening. And I have pivoted to a Western triple by saying, look, we're all good players. I'm not sure if I'm going to end up on the 2 versus 1 or 1 versus 2 part of this. Why don't we just all win and go crush the East together? And it usually doesn't last very long, but it is a really good way to reset the board, reset your alliances, and get people on your side in a formation that they maybe didn't even consider, because maybe they watch David Hood on the internet try to tell them there are absolutes, and it takes learning from a real player in order to enlighten them.
First of all, your diplomatic failure to convince someone of something in the West is hardly an argument for pivoting to Western triples. It's an argument for doing a better job in your negotiations.
Temporary failure, David. Temporary failure.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the way all of your failures are. My argument is not that Western triples are something that I can't or will not do. But even when I do them, I consider them an abomination. And here's why. And frankly, I think a lot of people agree with me on this one.
I don't think so, David.
Okay, because it's just ugly. Unless you are England, and even often when you are England, Western triples really set you up for failure. If you're the French, it seems awesome to go into the med early. That seems great. And occasionally that is the right thing to do, I'm here to tell you. But it's not very often the right thing to do. And it can be a very dangerous thing to do when you have England and Germany not fighting each other and potentially getting ready to jump into Burgundy in the Channel when you weren't watching, or North Atlantic when you weren't watching. If you're Germany, the dangers are obvious. And if you're England, it constricts your growth pattern. You can only send units through St. Pete under this arrangement. Occasionally, if the alliance is strong enough, you send a fleet around the Med or something around Mid-Atlantic into the Med. But in general, Western triples, when they form early, just tend to lock up the board and make it awful. So unless it's a defensive move, and I agree with you there, if you've already got an Eastern triple that's moving super lickety-split fast or something, then maybe so, but that's more of a defensive option. Western triples, where you're intending to go and defeat the stalemate line early and all that, I consider to be an abomination. And I first wrote this in Diplomacy World in 1988 or so. Now, I'm not sure you were born then. Maybe you were. But I have had this opinion for a long time. I just find them destructive to the strategic flexibility and, frankly, to the fun of the game. I'm not surprised that you disagree with this, since you are so anti-fun.
And I am not surprised, David, that you have held this view for, I guess, 45 years now. That's the part that doesn't surprise me.
Ronald Reagan was still president when I wrote this. All right. Gunboat is diplomacy without soul. Jordan,
yeah,
you have an answer to this question, I'm assuming.
I certainly do. That is false. And I would have agreed with that in my much younger days, in my diplomacy infancy. I thought gunboat was ridiculous. Why would you play diplomacy without being able to talk to each other? That's the whole point. And I have played more gunboat lately. It's a little bit easier to work into my schedule, because when I try to play a press game, I tend to get carried away and I tend to write a lot, as is well documented. And so gunboat is a way of kind of dipping into the hobby when I don't have as much time. But what I've learned is that there is a ton of communication in gunboat. And the basic idea of trying to get all the pieces to move away from you is the same in Gunboat. You're just communicating in a different way. You're supporting units to let them know you want to be allied with them. You're directing your forces one way to let the rest of the board know, okay, look, I'm going to be going this way, so you need to account for me and do whatever it is going to sort of be mutually beneficial with that. What I've learned is that one of, I guess the soul of diplomacy, one of the most interesting features of the game is that you have 7 powers acting simultaneously. And it's all one zero-sum game where you need to help some, hurt some, but sort of put this puzzle together every turn. And the puzzle involves trying to predict what everybody else is going to do given the circumstances, and then enter your moves to sort of solve that puzzle every move without knowing without knowing anything about what other people are going to do. So that to me is the soul. You get that in a Gunboat game, and it's really important if you're playing Gunboat and trying to be good at it, that communication is still so much a part of that game. You just can't send press with words. That's it.
Well, I want to answer this question by saying yes, but I'm going to say yes, but Gunboat is incredibly fun, and I've been playing Gunboat for a long time and still enjoy it a lot.
Centuries.
It is. I have. So basically since it was invented, I think. The problem that I have with it is that people tend to equate it with diplomacy. It is like playing a different game in many ways. It's like taking some other board game that you like and saying, I really enjoy this game, and I do. But to me, the soul of diplomacy is not the puzzle you were just talking about, although I do think that is a fun part of it. To me, the soul of diplomacy is the negotiation and is the complexity of the multi-layered facets of the negotiation. Yes, you get to talk some in Gunboat. You get to communicate with your moves, etc. If you're playing it on Backstabber somewhere, you get to do fake moves or funny moves, and that can sometimes tell people what you want to tell. But it is a poor substitute for the type of diplomatic interaction that we have through negotiation in a regular game of diplomacy. So again, I want to be clear. I do enjoy Gunboat a lot. I've played it a lot. I do think it has a lot of value for for newer players learning the game, because it helps you teach tactics and helps you teach, basic strategic considerations about stalemate lines and things like that. And even alliance management, those kinds of things can even be happening in Gunboat. But I do think that people who say that Gunboat is like a similar experience, it's a sort of in the same family, but it's a cousin. It's not even a brother or sister. It's like a cousin to the regular game, because the regular game has the soul, which I would consider to be the interpersonal communications.
How did they play Gunboat before there were telephones?
Well, first of all, we played it live. And I know your question is not intended to be serious, but let me give you a serious answer, which is it actually is pretty interesting to play Gunboat live. You obviously need a GM. And if you want to maintain, in the old days, and this is going to be an old days comment, we didn't care about knowing who the other players were. That wasn't the issue, is that we just were not allowed to, we were required not to communicate with each other. But we would do in face-to-face tournaments, we'd have being Gunboat. I knew I was playing Austria, or you knew I was playing Austria. I knew you were playing Turkey. We just promised we wouldn't talk to each other in the bathroom. And we were all in the same room. We all had the same pad of paper, so you couldn't tell from the GM reading the orders whose orders they were. So there are ways to do it that are face-to-face that's fun, and it is fun. And it's also shorter. It's also shorter, which is something that's also important in various contexts, including face-to-face.
Were there ever huge scandals involving facial expressions or nose twitches, or did you need someone to kind of sort that out?
Yes. Clearing your throat when you heard an order that you were disagreeing with. To make it clear that you were, yes, all of those things happened, and all of those things led to lots of screaming, shouting after the game, etc. So the fun of diplomacy exists in Gunboat, but not the soul.
Scandalous.
All right, let's go to another subject. Building English armies is overrated. So I'm going to let you answer this question first to tell me what you think about. There are many people, again, many diplomacy people who think that if you want to be a successful England, you got to build as many armies as you can early So what do you say about building English armies being overrated or not?
Sure. I don't know. My answer to all these boring tactical absolutes is that you got to be flexible and react to the board and the players. My builds, I'm mostly talking to my neighbors about my builds. I'm mostly building allies with my builds. So that's principally what I'm thinking about, is how am I going to use my build to get what I want from somebody else's build? And that's especially critical for England, because for England, so much of your success is defined by the builds of your neighbors. If you can keep Russia from building in St. Petersburg a fleet, if you can keep Germany from putting fleets on the board, and you can keep France from hosting a northern navy, then you're going to do so well in the game. I think it could be quite flexible if you're building fleets or armies. For me, I'm talking to my neighbors and I'm trying to score diplomatic points by building in ways that they want me to build.
How about if you're trying to solo? There's a theory of the universe that if you're England and you want to get up to close to 18, you really are going to have significant armies on the continent to get pressure on the interior centers. What do you say about that?
Yeah, I'd say more likely than not that's true. You're going to want armies to hold Munich and Berlin, which so often have to be part of an English solo. So I can see the wisdom in that. I don't think there's any hard and fast rule that you have to do that fast in order to set up that possibility, because I think you can do it later. And it's a lot easier to do it later if you can get the pieces moving in the other direction. So I think it's more flexible than this prompt would suggest, this terrible, boring prompt. But I definitely see the wisdom in you're going to have armies, and at least the most likely way to solo as England is going to have armies in the middle of the board controlling the German mainland, which obviously you can't do unless you get them there.
You know, saying you're responding to something boring and then talking for a very long time tends to dispute your original comment about this being boring. Here's why I added that to the list. I think there are plenty of commentators, plenty of thinkers and writers about diplomacy who will tell you that if you're England, you need to build armies early, and you can't have too many fleets.
Sorry.
And I think that's wrong. I think that is wrong. I think that fleets are actually way more useful to England early in the game in many, many, many ways. And so, for one thing, to establish fleet dominance, to make sure that you have ability to put pressure on the centers that you can get to with fleets, which are the first ones you can get to. So unless you're in an abomination Western Triple, in which case you're supposed to build armies and feed them into St. Petersburg, into Russia, unless you're doing that, which nobody should do that, then I think that that this statement, which is often made in diplomacy media, is wrong. And I think that you should, in the early parts of the game, fleets are usually more important. I agree with you that flexibility is important and you need to react to the situation. Obviously, building armies early can be fine. But I think this emphasis that people give on you can't have a successful England unless you've got armies in your, a lot of armies in your mix early, I think that's just incorrect.
I think what you say is fair, but I want to get away from this academic discussion about nothing. I want to help your viewers, David, because I care about your viewers, and I'm not on your show every time. So let's give them a little something here. The most important thing for England in the early game is what your neighbors build. You want them to build armies. You don't want them to build fleets that can come after you. And if you can succeed in helping them to not build fleets that could come and get you, you're going to have a terrific game.
Well, it's certainly true that the fewer fleets there are, the less threat you're under. When you are allied with the Germans, do you try to talk them out of the second fleet? Because if I'm Germany, that's not going to work.
100% I do, David. And
Okay.
I don't just try to talk them out of it. I will create incentives so that they won't do it. I'm happy to help them into Belgium if it means they're going to promise not to build a second fleet. I'm happy to give them concessions elsewhere. I'm happy to help them with Russia, whatever it takes. England has a lot to give early on. There are a lot of other threats Germany's facing, a lot of other threats that France has to worry about. I am willing to give and give and give in order to reduce the northern fleets on the board in the early game, because it really locks in your neighbors and gives them fewer choices other than to continue to work for this sensational and generous English player who just helped them into Belgium.
and also puts Germany on the serving table as the meal for England if they have only one fleet.
Well, I mean, it might be a very large serving table by the time it gets to that, because they've got a joyous ally in England, a delightful ally, and they've been able to use their units elsewhere to make gains rather than the good fences make good neighbors lining up fleets against England when we both have better things to do.
You know, it's surprising to me, as delightful as you apparently are, at least self-aware as being delightful, that you were unable to get anybody on your side in that ODC top board. That is surprising to me, and I just wonder how that could be, as delightful as you apparently are.
And David, here we've heard it. You've got one example of a game I haven't won, and you've gone back to it twice. I'm sure you'll go back to it a third and fourth time because there aren't many other examples.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You've won almost all your other games. Let's go to our final topic, which is snitches get stitches. Now, Jordan, this one was your topic. Tell me what your answer to this one is. Snitches get stitches.
This is another moment when I want to be helpful to your viewers.
Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Listen, don't be a rat. Information control is one of the most important parts of the game. It's so important. It's about finding a partner or an ally, or even someone who's not an ally, and locking that information down, making sure that what you say isn't going to get repeated to the rest of the board the minute you turn around. And if you find someone who's not reliable that way and starts passing on information, there's nothing that will shut down an option, burn a bridge, prevent you from working with that person again. Because if you can't keep a secret, then it makes it really hard to plan with you. So snitches get stitches. I think that, and look, I probably got some stitches early on in my career because I thought, great, I have this information from Russia. If I tell it to Germany, if I tell it to Turkey, they're going to like me better and appreciate it. It's going to screw over Russia and they're going to fight. And great. It seems so easy if you're thinking one step ahead. But if you burn your reliability and integrity like that, you just don't have options later in the game. So yes, snitches get stitches. Don't be a rat. There's no faster way to completely reduce your options and burn your reliability.
Sometimes you got to blab. Sometimes you got to blab. You got to tell somebody some information they need to know that you've gotten from your ally because you need them to defeat a stab that's coming or an attack that's coming to keep your ally in check. Sometimes you need to repeat things that people tell you when they're not your ally because you need that information to be utilized by someone on the other side of the board to prevent an important move or to keep someone else from making a move that you were trying to keep them from making. There are plenty of situations. Now, I agree with you that you can't just be a sieve and all the water that goes through just goes all the way through you and you never keep any secret. You definitely can't do that or you're totally unreliable. But I do think there are situations in which betraying that confidence is what the game actually requires you to do. If you don't do that sometimes, then I think you're doing it wrong, says me.
David, I don't even know if we can play together after this.
I don't know that we could play together before this.
Look, you're probably right. There are probably some circumstances where it might make sense, especially if the person telling you a secret has burned you in the past. But as a general rule, as a broad takeaway for all you people spending your time watching YouTube diplomacy discussions, take it very easy with passing on information because the long-term impact of what you lose is just can be so severe compared to what you might pick up when you think you're going to make a couple of folks fight.
You will not believe what Conk told me in conf. Oh, wait, are you done yet? Did you finish talking?
Please.
Actually, I agree with you. That is good advice. Do not do that so much that you cannot be an unreliable partner. I completely agree with you, Conk, because you're so awesome and so delightful. And you've certainly been a delightful guest here on Two-Way Draw Part Deux that we've just recorded for this fine audience. Any other final thoughts for this audience?
David, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm always glad to be here. But seriously, what a just boring, horrible set of questions from a tired old man.
Well, I am tired because I feel like you've talked about 3 minutes for everyone, 1 minute of mine. So I am a little worn out at this point, but I still appreciate you being on the show. Thanks to all of you watching at home. We hope you have enjoyed this broadcast of Deadline. If you have news, ideas for features, or feedback of any kind, please feel free to send an email to info@diplobn.com, or you can drop me a line directly using davidhood@dixiecon.com. To review all of our broadcast offerings, visit the website www.diplobn.com. This is David Hood signing off. I wish you brightness and bliss and, of course, Belgium.